Recording has started.
Okay, thank you. All righty. last Sunday, last week, we studied the 10 criteria on how to determine exactly which stars are included and in what order on the star calendar. And I wanted to add one more thing. We're on slide 408, just to finish that. There's something I didn't say. I said at first I had tried to order the stars strictly by the exact longitude. And then I realized, once they had been chosen, I realized ancients wouldn't have a way to determine a difference in longitude of 1/100th of a degree or something. And so what would work, and what would work for the man on the street to remember? And then this idea came about, follow the dots or connecting the dots, which is what slide 408 is about. But someone might have asked, well, how do you know that's right? I mean, it's a neat idea, but is God really using that? And I wanted to comment on why I really believe it's right. If you look on this slide, one of the brightest, in fact, the brightest star in the northern sky in the summer, actually any time of year in the northern sky, is Alpha, that I'm circling with my little arrow here, in Boötes, Arcturus. And that's the day on which Noah is born. Well, I had to fudge. If you're just doing longitude, that didn't quite work. And I thought, well, there's some rule I don't know to make it work. And that was true on many of the bright stars. Joseph being born on Aldebaran, I could go through a whole bunch where you know that has to be the star, but it was a day or so off. And I knew that I didn't have all the rules. When this rule was discovered of just connect the dots, every one of those worked. In other words, Eta here is 31 Virgo. Just the next star in line, you just follow the dots, and that just worked out to be Noah's birthday. That happened in basically every case. That's when you know you have it right, that there's a pattern, and you don't have to fudge and say, well, this man's really important, so we bent the rules for him. One of the things we're learning now, that in Zion, you don't bend rules, everybody's equally important, you don't do that. If there may be another rule to cover it, but you don't bend to break the rules. So I just thought I'd say that's how I'm very confident that this is the correct method. Okay, now we move to tonight. And tonight we're going to be jumping around again. I'm going to go back to slide, actually 401. And, oh no, I'm going back, excuse me. I'm going back all the way to 367. And this way I'll hit all the high points and we'll still finish with 2 sessions after tonight. So this one is talking about different constellations and what they can well, wait a minute. Let's see. We've discussed this. I've got to check where I'm at. Males can be nations and wives their religion. Let me just look at the ones I have in mind here. I remember talking about that. I don't remember talking about this one, so we'll start here. There are 16 major holy days for the 15 brightest stars in the star calendar. Now, this is something new. On all the other calendars, there were holy days during the year for Passover, for seasonal holy days, tabernacles, atonement. But there were no days where we said, hey, this is a really special day just by itself, not for any other reason. Not so with stars. Stars, you have bright stars and dim stars. And the bright stars, I had to find out where the cutoff was. but it looked like it was at 16. And that's, I've used this model and it's been good so far. There are 16 major holy days, only 15 brightest stars, because one of them, the star Fomalhaut, is actually on 2 different days because it's in 2 different constellations. 5 of these bright stars are in the north. And see, there's number 1 is Arcturus that I was just mentioning. Oh, these numbers are in order of brightness. And so remember, the stars that represent heaven are above the ecliptic up in this northern part of the sky. The stars that represent the earth are around on the ecliptic, and the stars that represent the underworld are down here in the south underneath. So there's 5 stars in the heaven area, 7 on the earth for 12, and 4 in the underworld. And the brightest star of all is Sirius in the south, in the big dog. And here we see that Fomalhaut is both in the southern fish and Fomalhaut is in the waterman, in Aquarius. So, okay, so those are all major holy days. Now we go to slide 387. Now here's another set of stars that are major holy days. Even though I have the writing in blue, which usually means minor, just blue is easier to see. The dragon we've talked about can represent either God or Satan. In the calendar, it's always God because there's no evil constellations. There are 12 stars altogether in Draco. 7 of them are major holy days, and the other 5 are minor. All of the stars in the constellation of representing God. This is the only one representing God. All of the rest are Jesus. But this one seems to be the Father, as far as I can tell. And I can't really tell. It could be, it can also be Christ, I guess. He's also represented by a serpent. One of the main things that hit me as I was doing this, for those of you that know about chakras, in these last days we're going to start learning about the spiritual side of the world and the energy centers. And the names that came to me to give these stars all tie into the chakras. And by the way, the places, there's a paper on this, and I looked up where the organs inside a snake are. And these stars are right where the organs are that correspond to chakras. So anyway, so the name of this star is Crown, but it's celestial crown, and it means the crown of the head. This star is visionary, it's right at the eye. And this is right out of Ptolemy's descriptions. He says, this star is the eye of the dragon. This is the forehead. This is the mouth. And that is the one that's the word of God. And the major prophets are born on these days. Enoch, I think, is born on 2 of them. He's born on both visionary. Oh, I'd have to look that up. But a lot of them are born on 1 of these, or sometimes even 2. The unified heart is one of them. The power center is one. Gut feeling. And this was also the circle of North Stars is on this circle going around. And Alpha Draconis, Thuban, was the North Star back in the days of Abraham. Anyway, that's another set of stars that are holy just because they're stars. This one here, I originally had named it something like, I forgot the name now, but because almost none of these have names from the Arabs or anything. They're all not really too bright. But this would be the throne of God right in the center, and this is the star in the calendar nearest the throne of God. And I had a name for that, like I think it was Exalted. But then when I saw the pattern of the chakras, then it got changed to Power Center. Okay, let's move on. We are going to go now back to slide 366. All right, now we're going to go to the lunar stations. And this is another set of stars that are going to be holy days just because of their placement. Again, no relation to Passover or any of those things. So there's going to be a lot more holy days on the star calendar than on the others, because later on, and probably next week, we'll talk about how the stars they also have the equivalent of Passover and all of the 30 holy days that their other calendars have, in addition to all these stars. As I recall, there's 91 holy days out of 364, and so it's like one star in 4 is a holy day. And when I prayed and made sure I was doing things right, I was reminded that in the book of Enoch it says all of these stars are holy men, and it's okay that so many are holy days. So this is another set. The ancient Babylonians and the ancient Greeks and the ancient Persians all had lists of 28 stars that are about equally spaced around the equator, and they were called lunar stations. 28 times 13 is 364 days for the full revolution. So, and the moon goes around this Earth in about 28 days compared to the stars. Not the phases of the sun, but the star sidereal month is 27 1/3 days, close enough to 28. So there's a set of stars that are about 13 degrees apart around on the equator, and all of these stars are in the zodiac. These are, originally I thought some of these stars could be up. There's places in the zodiac where there just aren't any stars. And on the Arab list, for example, I'm pointing down here into the Pisces. Between the two fishes, there's just nothing there. I mean, it's really bleak. And the constellation of Pegasus comes down in that area. And the Arabs used a couple of bright stars there for the lunar mansion. And one thing I had to find out for myself is that fair or not? And the answer is no. All of the stars of the 28 mansions are in the 12 of the zodiac. So it took me quite a while. Well, I compared all of this. I have lists from all three. I really only have the lists of the Arabs and the Babylonians. And I have a paper on this where I show the stars they used. And most of the stars that are on this list, that is my final, I hope, chosen list, are on one of those two lists. And the ones that are not are where they had stars from other constellations, and I saw that wasn't allowed. So anyway, I start the numbering up here with Virgo, with the star that's in the wing of Virgo. I'm not going to go through the whole list. You can look at this and you can read my paper if you want more details. But just know, when I first started, I ignored this for a long time, and everybody ignores it. If you take a course on astronomy, lunar mansions will never be mentioned. And they'll say, oh, that's something from astrology. Well, you go talk to an astrologer, they don't use them. So what are these things for? And the reason I got interested is they were obviously holy days. When you look at the dates that were determined from the Hebrew calendar and Venus calendar, all the other calendars, they all fell on these stars not all, but I mean more than is statistically expected out of 364 stars. It was significant that these stars kept showing up. So they were clearly holy. I didn't know why at first, but when I wrote the paper, I just said, I'm going to try to find out what the real list is. So that's my suggestion. Okay, now we go, we jump all the way up to 396 from 366. Okay. Wait a minute. I'm at 396. Here was the big discovery, which came quite a bit later. That's 30 slides later. And these slides were being made real time at this time, so it's like 30 days later. This was discovered. That's why I'm jumping around. These slides are in the order of discovery rather than the last ones are, rather than a carefully organized presentation, which I'm trying to do now. This was an amazing, totally knocked me over discovery. 20 of the 28 lunar mansions correspond to the 20 day signs of the Ventina that we studied way back on slide 30 in the same order. That ought to be in italics and flashing orange neon or something, which testifies of the creative design, because you have 20 things. Just to have the 20 things correspond is amazing, but to have it in the same order is so far beyond chance and probability that there's no question that this was designed. So look at this just a little bit. I've got a few examples down at the bottom. Light, conception, and seed. Let's just look at that. There is alpha. Remember that the last is the first and the first is the last. This one that I call number 1 is really going to be it's the last of the pictures, flower. And the last picture is really the first. This is 0th. We've talked about this over and over. They don't call it 0, they call it the last, but it acts like a 0, just like 10 is the last of 10, but it has the 0, which is in it. The same concept. So star number 1 here, for picture number 1 is light. The corresponding star is the seed. Light represents conception, and we'll show that on the next slide. But if everybody remembers what everything was way back on slide 30, the meaning of light is the conception, and wind is when the spirit enters, is quickening, temple is birth, dragon is when evil enters, serpent is rebirth, skull is death. Look at this. The skull lines up with the star in the scorpion's stinger. I mean, that's a match. Now, this is where one of the Babylonians, they said, oh, that's too far away from the ecliptic. There's a nice star here in Ophiuchus who's stepping on the star, you know, and they used that star because it was closer and more convenient. But see, it's not allowed, because I had to choose between those, and I had to find out what's the rule. And the rule was very simple. It has to be in a zodiac constellation. So, in fact, it was these two that led me to the whole thing, because I said, wait a minute, there's 6. The first two I discovered were light and skull. And I said, that's just too good to even have 2 of them line up. And then everything lined up. The serpent lined up with wisdom. The serpent lines up with, well, anyway, I'm not going to go through all of them now. The main point is there's 8 left over. There's only 20 day signs, and there's 8 lunar signs. So the only choice I had was I could throw out any 8. But even there I can't, because I can't throw out any between light and because there's 6. They're both number 6, and so there can't be any extras in there. But if you look, I've dropped out some of the stars, so that there's only 20 shown here. Okay, so other examples: the dragon is evil, and the dragon is scorpion. skull and stinger. Water is water. Look at that. There's one of the 20 signs is water, and one of the bright stars is water. I mean, this is pretty much a match. Another one that really, well, let's just go right to the last one. The last one is flower, which is when you become one with God, is the meaning of this sign. And here you have angelic wings. I thought that meant she was an angel. When this all came together, I realized that means it's divinity. The woman who is the mother of Jesus, the woman who has the seed, who's going to be Christ, the woman who's the church that's going to bear the son of the kingdom of God as a son. She's not an angel. She's divine. Mary really is the mother of God, like the Catholics call her. I have to whisper that. That's funny. Anyway, let's move on. We have things to see if we can cover tonight. Let's see. Let's do the next one. Given that 20 of the 28 lunar mansions link to the 20-day signs, here are the lunar names to compare. So this is the star name, and some of these are known to all people. The seed is, when the star Spica is one of the brightest. It's in the zodiac. It's one of the 15 bright stars that's bright just because it's bright. I mean, that it's holy. It's one of those top 15. It's major holy just because it's bright. Now it's also the seed of woman, which is one of the 28 signs. All four of the big bright stars are included in the 28. And it represents conception. I've got a comment on that. I hope we cover this on another slide, but in case we don't, when John looks at a map of the sky in heaven, which is what I believe the book of Revelation chapter 12 is about, where he sees the great constellation of the woman and the dragon, etc. He sees there's a circle of 24 stars surrounding the throne of God that represent 24 elders. If we go back to this picture, the throne of God is right in the center of this circle. Going around here, he says there's also 4 beasts. All 4 of the beasts are around here, so there's 4. That leaves, out of 28, that leaves 24 other stars. I believe that's what's really going on here. These are the seats of 24 of the elders. And then there's the 4 big ones. And the only elder I've identified, I believe, and I just don't see any choice, is the stinger. That's Enos, the grandson of Adam. He's going to sit in that chair. On those 24 chairs, there's going to be a skull on the back of one of them. They all have one of these 24. They have the star name pictures on them. So maybe it'll be a scorpion stinger on the back of the chair. But everything about Enos's life is about death. He's born on one skull. He dies on one skull. I've had other slides on this. We've talked about it before. That is a match. And the others will be something like that, I believe. I've never written a whole paper on this because I don't know enough. If we look at these other pictures, they mostly match up. For instance, number 8, sacrifice, is the star name, and materialism. That's what you have to sacrifice at this step. And we're going to get to the steps pretty soon, I hope. And then it comes baptism, and that represents triumph. That's in the water, in the stream. And then you still go through anguish. Anyway, the star names and these day sign names are way back on slide 30. I did not change those to make this work. I did change a couple of star names when I saw what was going on to make them fit better. Okay. I think angel has been changed. I haven't realized that, but I think I have a new name for that, which is, I believe it's heavenly. And that would include an angel, but it also includes higher beings. Okay, enough of this. Let's go to slide 401. I'll just click them one at a time. Whoop, I went a little too much. Okay, now we're going to talk about precession and how it slowly changes the stars that come up in the spring. So this, if you remember, this is a section of the zodiac with 3 constellations in it, of the bull, the ram, the bull, and the twins. And this line here represents when the sun rises on March 20 or 21st of the spring equinox. In what year? In the year minus 4,000, it's right here. Just like the Egyptian pictures that often show the horns of a bull and the sun right between it. It's like the beginning of time. And that's what I believe that Egyptian symbol means after Abraham taught him this stuff. And here's 3000 BC, 2000. At the time of Christ, there's a little 0 right there. Time of Christ, it's right on this line of the fishes. And so it's going this way. It's going the opposite way. It's called the regression sometimes of the equinoxes. It's going the opposite direction from the sun is going clockwise on this. So this one says that precession, slide 401, precession slowly shifts 12 major holy stars, star days, corresponding to on the perpetual Hebrew calendar, to major holy days, to be in different constellations. So I have mentioned in earlier slides, there's something like, just like the Hebrew Passover is on 15 Nisan, there was a 15 Gem was Passover on the star calendar at the time of Adam. So way up here, you know, this slide needs to be updated. The point is, one of the stars in Gem is 15. That represents the Passover at the time of Adam. The day he leaves the Garden of Eden was Passover on the Hebrew calendar, and it's also Passover on the star calendar. Then, 2,000 years later, you come along, and now the Eye of the Bull, which is Aldebaran representing the seer, about the time of Abraham, that star is now Passover. In other words, the star calendar Passover is not fixed to one star. It's fixed to a season on Earth, just like the real Passover is on all of the other calendars. All of the other, not the uniform, all the other regular calendars, there's something like Passover, and it's always in the spring. Same here. And by the time of Christ, Passover is on this star in the horn of the bull. So that's really important. Let's see if I can go. I'm going to try to go just a little faster to allow a little time for questions. Now, Taurus is spring on, now we're going to look at the uniform star calendar. Now on the uniform star calendar, they're going to have a set of these Passover type days also, but it'll be locked in to the other uniform star calendars, and it will rotate through the seasons. All of the uniform versions really rotate through the seasons. So you can say, well, which one does it line up with? And the answer is it lines up with the one at the time of Abraham, where Passover was on 15 in Taurus. And that makes sense because these are the big four. These are the big four stars, are Aldebaran here, and over in Scorpio it's Antares. So Antares is tabernacles always on the uniform star calendar because it doesn't precess. It's locked in to always be this way. So again, the uniform is the easiest to keep track of. There's just a couple more slides and then we have room for some questions. Now, each zodiac season matches a month. Oh, that's another thing. So I now call them zodiac months or zodiac seasons. And so again, we're on the uniform version. Spring, Nisan, the bull is the spring month. It's like Nisan. And on the Enoch calendar, it's called mid-spring. And it's like Iyar is the second month. The point is the 12 constellations are in fact like months. That means you can have a correlation of all of the holy days from the Hebrew calendar, the one that's always on the 15th of Nisan, the one that's always 7 weeks after the day after Passover, basically, is Easter. First fruits. And it's in Sivan. And so the same thing works on the star calendar. So now you have 30 more holy days. This gets pretty tricky. But we're almost to the end of the course. We're tough enough to do some tricky stuff. Here is a chart of the Hebrew Enoch and uniform star, and here's all of the holy days from the Hebrew calendar. And it's just a table to show you how all of the holy days, red for major, blue for minor, how they line up, what they're called in the Hebrew. Notice on Enoch, they're very similar. Tammuz, 17 Tammuz, 17 summer, 24, 24. Tammuz is the summer month, and it's called the summer over in Enoch. Leo is the beginning, back in the days of Abraham, and that choice, that corresponded to Leo. So anyway, there's a table that shows them all, and I think I've only got one more slide for tonight, and I'm just going to click through to it. And it's 4:20 is the last slide for tonight. And because of precession, Passover, this is kind of what I just said, but here's a whole slide on it. Passover then changes zodiac months, the Passover on the star calendar. So here's an example. Passover started in 1801 BC. That's when Joseph is born. This is the day Joseph is born of Egypt. He's born on the star day of the seer, and that is the equivalent of, that is Passover. And this is not the difference between this slide and the last. The last was the uniform calendar, where all through history this would be Passover. On this calendar, it's only Passover at that time. 2,000 years later, Passover is going to be on this horn, on this star in the horn of the bull. And 2,000 years later, it'll be up here. Well, wait a minute. I went. At the time of Christ, this is important. The first day of Aries, or New Year's Day at this time, I told you before, was here right at the 0. Passover is on the 15th day of the month. So 15 days later brings you over to this star. So Passover is here, while New Year's was here. That's a little tricky. Anyway, that's the last slide for tonight. We now have, we have 3 minutes left. I will turn it over to anybody for 3 minutes of questions.
I put a question in the chat, but I can ask it.
Oh,
the stars in the Revelations that match in Revelation 12, would you agree with Joseph that Revelation is an easy book?
It might have been, in the Book of Mormon says it was an easy book before it got changed. It went through the hands of the Great and Abominable Church. I don't know how much stuff they changed. But to me, it's not an easy book. And if you have the spirit of revelation, it might be real easy, but I don't claim that. But on the other hand, if you work at it and are shown line upon line, it does open up somewhat. So it's getting easier all the time, but I'd sure like to know exactly how it was back at first. One important, well, we've talked about that. Any other questions? Oh, did I answer that well enough, Russell?
Yes, I think that's fine. My other question, on one slide, you called them lunar star stations. Is lunar mansions and lunar star stations the same thing?
Yes, they are. I think lunar mansions is what all the ancients called it. I think that was too hard for astronomers. That just sounded too hokey, or I don't know. Most modern astronomers, if they mention it at all, will say lunar stations. And I use the terms almost interchangeably in my paper, I think. But I said more about mansions in the pictures and the title. But yes, short answer is they're the same. And it's interesting because station, they both mean something. The idea is the moon, as it goes around, it sort of, stops at each station like a train, for fuel or something. Station makes a lot of sense, but the mansions are going to be closer because these are the 24 elders, and they have to do with mansions. So anyway, I try to use them both. Alrighty, well, it's, I think, time to stop. So I will push the ending. We'll stop the meeting. So we'll continue next time. Thanks for your attendance.